You've seen it a million times, right? A big construction project starts, and there's that giant, optimistic sign out front. Completion, spring 2025. But then you drive by 2 years later and, well, it's still a mess of steel and concrete. It's something we all see, but if you're in the industry, you know it's a constant, expensive headache.
So, what's the deal? Why do these super detailed, professionally made timelines just completely fall apart in the real world? It's not just a string of bad luck. The reason is usually something much, much deeper. So, let's start with what I like to call the schedule illusion. This is the trap we fall into, believing that a project schedule is this perfect, unchanging prediction of the future. But the truth is, there's almost always this huge, gaping chasm between the plan on paper and what's actually happening on the ground. And this really gets to the heart of it. On one side, you have the plan. Everything's neat, clean, predictable. But then you look at reality, and it's a total domino effect. One little delay happens, and it just triggers this whole cascade of other problems, knocking the entire project way off track. So where does that first domino fall? Well, a lot of the time, failure is literally built right into the project's foundation. The schedule isn't just a victim of things going wrong. Sometimes it's a blueprint for failure from the very first day. And it usually boils down to two really basic things. First, just plain old poor planning. Not really thinking through how all of the tasks depend on each other, or what resources you actually need. And second, being way too optimistic. We set these crazy unrealistic timelines because of pressure or just wishful thinking, and that basically dooms the schedule before you even start. Okay, but let's say you have a pretty decent plan. Things can still go sideways. And the next huge problem is a total lack of visibility. It's like you're flying a plane in a storm. You feel like you're moving forward, but you have no idea if you're on course, on time, or about to fly straight into a mountain. Take a look at this. It's a super simple example of how this happens. The foundation work finishes 5 days late. Doesn't seem like a huge deal, right? But that pushes back the framing, which then also finishes late. Suddenly, by the time you're supposed to start the electrical, you're already way behind. And the problem is just getting bigger. That question mark at the end, that's the growing cloud of uncertainty that can totally poison a project. This is the real danger of flying blind. You might be telling your stakeholders, hey, we're 75% done, because that's what the piece of paper says. But in reality, you're barely at 50%. This gap between what you think is happening and what's actually happening, that's where projects die. You just can't fix a problem you don't even know exists. And this quote just nails it. It's almost never the first little problem, a late shipment or a day of bad weather, that kills a project. It's the accumulation of all those little problems. And that happens when the fix, the corrective action, comes way too late because nobody saw the issue when it was still small. Okay, so that's the grim part. That's the problem. But how do we actually fix it? This is the fun part. This is where we stop being a victim of the schedule and start becoming its master. It's all about shifting from being reactive to being proactive. And the solution comes down to this one powerful idea: progress control. It's not about making a perfect, rigid plan and then just crossing your fingers. Nope. It's about actively steering the project. It means you're constantly monitoring what's going on and making small corrections early. Think of it like keeping both hands on the steering wheel the entire drive. So this breaks down into a really simple but incredibly powerful 3-step process. First, you've got to start with a realistic schedule. That means you have to fight that urge to be overly optimistic. Second, you have to monitor your progress constantly, not once a month, but all the time. This is what gives you the visibility so you're not flying blind. And third, with that clear view, you take corrective action early, before those tiny little issues turn into that giant cascading delay we talked about. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this: trying to create the perfect plan is a waste of time. The real secret to success, the real game changer, is constant visibility. It's the ability to see at any moment exactly where you are versus where you're supposed to be. That's what gives you the power to adapt, to steer, and to actually finish the project on time. And that brings us to the final question I want you to ask yourself. When you look at your project schedule, is it a real, living map that's helping you navigate the messy, real-world terrain of your project? Or is it just a wish? A pretty picture of a destination with no real path to get there? Because honestly, the difference between those two is everything.